Okay, so I said to you that I would start at 2 minutes past 9, and 2 minutes past 9 it is. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jo Taylor. I'm MD of Let's Talk Talent, and I'm going to be your facilitator this morning on the third of our Learning at Work Week webinars this week. This is one of my personal favourites because I think we're all superheroes. I talk about this a lot, about unleashing your super strengths, unleashing your superpowers. So being able to talk to my peers, the community in which we operate in, and it's served me brilliantly for the last 30 years. I'm just really excited to be able to talk to you about the skills, the experiences, the attitudes that hopefully can enhance you and enhance your organization. So we're going to spend, I'm going to talk to you for about 25, 30 minutes, and then I'll pose questions as we go along, but I'm really happy to take questions at the end. So I can see people coming in, but for those that you haven't missed anything, but please just add into the chat as we go along. And do add in your questions. I'll make sure that I keep an eye on the chat and pause as we go through. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to look at the context, because let's be honest, the last 2 years have been phenomenal for HR, and it's a really proud moment to call ourselves HR leaders and HR professionals, because we are at the top table. We've been at the top table before, but now we've got an opportunity to change the fabric of work, and therefore this feels like a seminal moment for us to really look at how we can become HR superheroes. I'm going to share with you a model which I think could be really useful within your business to think about your own superhero traits, but also that you could use with your teams. It's our STAR model. We're going to share with you a template that you can use within your own team, and there will be follow-up afterwards. So we'll be able to send you follow-up if you want to kind of use it. And then we've got some offers for you at the end, because we would never do a webinar and not offer you something at the end to enhance you, your business, and your team. So hang on, because I promise you it will be worth it. Wonderful. So where do we start? Well, for me, this quote sort of epitomizes it, and I actually used it in a team day with a legal team actually a couple of weeks ago, because they were going through some phenomenal change. The leader had been in 9 months, and she was kind of reflecting, and she was thinking about how she moves her team from good to great. And they are overwhelmed, like we all are. They had too much to do. They weren't sure, where their priorities were. But she knew that the madness that existed within the organization couldn't continue, and they had to kind of create simplicity within the chaos. And I actually think that that's what our role as HR leaders is. Now is the time, as this quote says, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And I think that is absolutely critical for us to remember. There's been huge amounts of disruption. We've had to lead our businesses, lead our CEOs, lead sometimes very inexperienced leadership teams through massive disruption through COVID. We've got the war, the war in Ukraine. The world is, tumultuous. I think I've said that right. Yes, at the moment. But actually, we can't continue in the same way. And now's our opportunity to really carve that destiny, to change the fabric of work, to create simply irresistible organizations. And if we don't do it, then I think we haven't got a better time to do it. So really thinking about that kind of charge. And when you think about leadership, leading from the front, that forward motion of leadership, I really want to instill that in you. And that's how you are a superhero, is that you go against the tide, you challenge conventional wisdom. So now is the time, let's do it together. So why do I think that's really important? Well, I think it's really important because we've got an opportunity to be at the top table. Now, some of you all on this will say, but I've already been at the top table. Or actually, I might be worried because I'm going into the top table and I'm not sure how to operate. Well, HR has been at the forefront, and really been leading the vanguard of the pandemic, whether it's furlough, whether it's about well-being, whether it's about care, culture, leadership. We've absolutely been at the top table. And what we don't want to do is start to shrink back as things get back to this new normal, or whatever normality or hybrid or whatever world we're kind of living in. We don't want to shrink back. Actually, we want to stay there. And if not, and if anything, push on even further and take the business and the culture even deeper into sort of caring and looking after our people. If we don't, we're going to, I read something this week that actually unemployment has reached unemployment is less than job vacancies. So basically, there are more job vacancies than unemployment in the UK at the moment. Now that sort of happened for the first time, and I was kind of really shocked about that. But you can see it. People have taken choices about where they want to work, how they want to work, and they don't want to be coming into the office in the same way. They don't want to have the social contract, the psychological contract with work going back to that old factory model of 2, 5, 10 years ago. They want flexibility. They want to feel human. So let's put the human back into HR ultimately. But you've got, on the one hand, you've got the great resignation, and then you might actually have the great attraction, because you might be having to pivot your business pretty fundamentally. I mean, what you do and how you do it. So you might have lots of people leaving because they actually don't believe in the purpose and they want to go and do something else and completely change direction. And then you actually can't backfill. So things like succession planning are becoming even more important and career pathways are going to become even more important to invest in and join up. But the people are going to take your business forward. That, but it's become even more prevalent over the last couple of years. And therefore, it's about believing in the potential of your people. And the question to ask is potential for what? What potential do you have as a business, and what potential do your people give you? Is that leadership? Is that going into a specialist role? Is that investing in the talented many that exist within your organization? People are your currency. They have never been more important. So let's not get distracted by the noise that's existing within the world and really start to become human-centric and really start to even more create phenomenal experiences. So how do we make the most of it? Well, what we're seeing now is, if you've got that on one level in terms of the business imperative, of why we're at the top table, what are we seeing in terms of the HR teams are having to work through? Well, what we're seeing is that the pandemic has shown that there is a big leadership and management skill gap. And we're getting called a lot recently around, we need to invest in our directors or our MDs or our VPs or our heads of, because we're worried about how they're operating in a hybrid world. What are the skills that are needed in leadership and management? Our leaders and managers have had to not only lead and manage organizations and communicate and give confidence and be empathetic and resilient, but we've also had to support them, and they're also humans. So how are we making sure that we're supporting their leaders and managers, but we're also holding them to account in what we need them to lead and manage going forward? So it's not just about the KPIs and the delivery of the business. We actually want them to become more human-centric. There's been impact of hybrid in terms of work practices, the way that we're contracting, the way that people want to work, the sort of psychological safety, the ways in which we're managing and developing teams. That's going to absolutely change fundamentally in terms of hybrid. People's well-being has also risen up the agenda. So there's a huge amount of investment in well-being. And I don't know if any of you were on the webinar yesterday that Zoe did on, how as HR we can support and ourselves. But actually well-being has really risen up that agenda, and how we look after ourselves, but also how we look after the business, mental health, how we look at neurodiversity, how we really focus our minds much more on the whole human, I think is what we're seeing. When we look at the Great Resignation or the Great Attraction, the need to provide good career development, learning and development opportunities and pathways, people understanding where they can go, how they can do it, having continuous feedback, we're seeing loud and clear from a lot of organizations to invest in the people on their bench, the people, the talent that they have. And then it's obviously harder to attract great people. There are a lot of people who have gone into the marketplace, but finding that, how do you find the good as well as the great? And who are those people that you're investing in both internally? Are you going to invest more in your succession planning and growing your own? Are you going to need to buy in? What's the makeup of your workforce? Permanent, casual, freelance, apprentices, graduates. Really thinking about what that makeup ultimately is. And so that's what we're seeing. If you've kind of got the business and the global agenda, this is what we're seeing in terms of what you as hopefully leaders are, I don't want you to struggle, but I would hope that some of these ring true to you. So I'm going to pause for a moment and ask you, are you seeing these things right now? Is there anything missing that you think I have missed out? Is there anything in your organizations that you believe that you're seeing that is adding to the complexity of what you're having to deal with as an HR leader? I'd love to hear what you are struggling with in your organizations. So if you do agree, then type yes. Those are all the right things. If you don't agree, then let me know what are the things that you're seeing in your organizations. It would be brilliant. Just add into the chat. We'll just pause for a minute. Brilliant. Thanks, Steph. That's great. Paula, yes, you're saying brilliant. If you have any other challenges, please put it into the chat. Yep, Evie, I think that's really interesting about hybrid working. Great. I'm glad that we're kind of hitting them up. But please, if niche roles, that's an interesting one, Joanne. I think that's very true. We've become very much about generalists, but actually that specialist function. So Amy, you've lost the majority of your L&D team, by development, and then more people leaving. I think that's really difficult. A lot of businesses that we saw cut their L&D budget quite dramatically during the pandemic. So that's really interesting. Engineering, short-term supply chain. Yes, I can absolutely imagine. Brilliant. That's so super helpful. Please keep them coming as we go. But I'm really glad that this is ringing true, and that so hopefully we can help you a little bit during this conversation. So let's put the human back into human resources. I've said it a couple of times, so I won't labour the point. I think that we're people for, I'm doing a review at the moment of an HR function, specifically around, their why, their what, and their how. And one of the things that I've been going to feed back to the CEO is that the HR team is business first rather than people first. Now, some people might say, well, we've got to do both. That's absolutely right. But the people drive your business, not the other way around. And so therefore, putting the human into human resources is a key driver of you becoming an HR superhero and creating those simply irresistible organizations. But when we think about the people and the human side of HR, let's put aside the hard skills and qualifications, because everybody on this call will have phenomenal skills. Whether you're CIPD qualified, whether you've got generalist, TUPE, redundancy, data-driven, talent management, whatever it is, you've got the hard skills and qualifications. But by focusing on the human and the people side, which will help you stay at the top table, because it's your empathy, it's your care, it's your curiosity that enables you to create those simply irresistible organizations, not your qualifications and hard skills. So let's put that aside for a moment. And let's think about what those human skills might look like. And the way that we're going to look at that is through a model that we use in career development, and we've used it with a number of HR teams recently. And it's called our Star Persona Map. And it looks at the skills, the attributes, the training, and the relationships. And it thinks very clearly, takes away the technical skills and thinks very much from a human perspective around what exactly you want people to be good at, and how you're going to motivate, engage, train, and develop them in. So that if you were looking at this from a career perspective, if you were an advisor, you would know what an HR manager could look like. So it helps you both from a vertical perspective, but if somebody also is attracted to your business, you're being really clear and transparent. So it doesn't replace a job description, but it gives you much more that human element and a much clearer way of giving people clarity around what they need to do and how they need to do it. So we've done, when you think about the areas that you need support in, we've sort of talked about that already. I kind of jumped to that. So what we'll think about now is the STAR map. And let's think about, this is one that we prepared earlier. This is what we believe, if you were an HR superhero and you were looking to increase your human skills and attributes, here is the model that will really help you do that. And I'm not going to go through every element of it. And you may disagree. And if you disagree, I'm really happy for you to put that into the chat. But from our experience of working in HR for 30 years, and the work that we do now as a business, these feel the skills that are needed for the next 5 years. Attributes, training, and relationships. And so therefore what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them in a little bit more detail and give you some examples. So having a look at that, is there anything that you think is missing? So do you agree? If you don't agree, what do you think is that's the gap? Again, put into the chat what you think of seeing this for the first time, and then I'll take you through it in more detail. So do you agree that, brilliant, thank you, Amy, that's fantastic. Adaptability, yeah, adaptable, Steph, I think that's right. So what you could do is you could take this model and you could adapt it and make it your own within your organization. Okay, so let's go into this in a little bit more detail. Brilliant, I can see. Flexibility, yeah, that agility, Savita, I think that makes influencing, yeah, totally. So you could absolutely take this and make it your own. So we've given you a starter for 10, but you will know your business and you will know what you want to instill in your HR teams. So let's look at skills. And the two that I pulled out here were decision-making and resilience. So for me, we try and train people on, we criticize people for, well, they can't make a decision, they're not quick enough. But decision-making for me is about actually, I'm very driven by my gut. Those people that know me on this call will know that I tend to be very gut-driven. And decisive in that sense, but I'm not afraid to fail. So I always talk about, piloting and beta testing, because actually the way that I've learned throughout my career and made better decisions because of the experience that I've had is by making the wrong decisions. Sometimes by hiring the wrong people, by going with my gut and it not turning out as I want. Or not listening to my gut. And I've done that a couple of times in my career where I've not listened to my gut, and I've kind of really beat myself up about it, because actually if I'd listened to my gut, I would have actually made the right decision. So by thinking about, whether you're driven by your gut, whether you're more reflective, by thinking about situations that haven't gone so right, you can iterate and you can learn more and you can take more risk. And I think that's important when we, as HR, a lot of the time in operational HR, you can't because of the law, and there are policies and procedures. But I think in L&D, in talent, in reward and recognition, there is more opportunity and more scope to take risks. And in business partnering, it is enabling the business to take a risk, but also encouraging them to be more curious and be creative in that. So decision making feels, an important skill for us all to hone and to train ourselves on. And whether you believe the word is right, resilience, or not, I kind of have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the word resilience, because I think it can be a stick to beat people up. Well, that person, I heard it said by a head of department recently on a review I was doing of their team. Well, that person's just not performing because they're not resilient. They can't bounce back. And I just feel that just feels very negative to me. And we're all being told, buck up, you pull yourself together. It's just not, it just doesn't feel cared for. It doesn't feel the right tone and language. We all have good and bad days. We all have things that affect us. We all have lives outside of HR. We are all human at the end of the day. So for me, resilience is about understanding what motivates and energizes you. And I was doing a webinar yesterday for a leadership team, and I asked them this simple question, and I'll ask you the same question. What was it, or what was it that has really energized you over the last month? And by asking somebody what that energizes them, it really starts to get people to think in that positive mindset and think about what gives you joy and enables you to really focus on those things that motivate and energize you. Because if you're motivated and energized, then ultimately your team and the business will be that. So think about that question. What was it recently that you did that energized you? Brilliant. So put your thoughts into the chat. I'd love you to answer that question, because it's just so interesting to understand what motivates and energizes us. What motivates and energizes me is actually really giving something back. It's a reason why I set up my business. It's kind of core to who I am. And I fundamentally believe that purpose drives passion and passion drives purpose. And they are intrinsically linked together. And that gives me joy. And that's what motivates and energizes me. So it's great to see some of the answers, new job, new opportunities, being a part of an HR team, being able to support people. I love it. That's just fantastic. So hold on to that, because that enables you to be more resilient. Always ask yourself that question. Ask your teams, ask your managers what they did most recently that energized them. It's just a phenomenal question to get people to sort of to think about themselves. Brilliant. Love it. Learning. Love it. And raising awareness of neurodiverse talent. I love it. That does, and you're totally right, Mel. It is about that fire in the belly. I love that. So do keep your answers coming. It's great to see that. Fantastic. So when we think about resilience, ultimately resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. And as I've said, it's an overused term, but it's the elasticity that we enable ourselves to bounce back. But thinking about that question I posed to you and taking time to celebrate your successes enables you to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. And that's definitely been true for me over the last year. I feel very differently than I did last year. I lost my husband last year, and so I had to tap into that inner strength ultimately. And I woke up on New Year's Day and the sun was shining, and I took my dog Dylan out for a long walk in the fields around where I live. And I said, this year is going to be different. And I've really, really tried to do that this year. So it's not only, something that we mentally, but it's also a physicality. I've walked more. I've kind of seen friends more. Life feels brighter. Even though I miss him tremendously, at the end of the day, it's kind of how we bounce back and recover from those difficulties and toughness, but also how that changes over time. So I love it. And I love that, Samantha, cold showers in the morning. I love that. That's brilliant. My aunt does that as well. So if that gives you joy, awesome. Absolutely brilliant. So that's resilience. That gives you a little bit more in decision making. And if you want to understand more about yourself and what motivates and energizes you, we do have a motivational playbook, which gives you hints and tips. And it's a little, says questions, and it gives you a RAG status on green, on red, amber, green. So if anyone would like to take that, it is a paid for tool. I'll give you more information at the end, but Charlie will put the tool into the chat. And if anyone would like to do it and get some hints and tips, it's a workbook ultimately. I'm really happy. Please take it. Hopefully it'll be really helpful for you. So let's look at training. So we're going through STAR, so skills, training. So training, this is about how you coach and how you're a connector. So coaching, again, can be an overused word, and you don't have to be a qualified coach. I do coaching as a practitioner rather than as a qualified and have a particular academic qualification. But really, it's about how you give the space and time to support others to realize their potential. So whether you're mentoring, whether you're coaching, whether you're managing, whether sometimes you're even counseling, I think those are really important traits to have as a HR superhero. So we have an opportunity to, coach each other as peers. We have an opportunity to coach managers, coach our team, but it's about creating that safe space, that psychological safety, where people can see you as someone they can go to for advice, but they also don't end up dumping everything on you. I've definitely found that sometimes when we're in our profession, that we become the dumping ground for dysfunction or toxicity. Ultimately, we need to show that we care and we're empathetic and listen, but we also need to hold people accountable, because we're not there to solve their problem. We're there to enable and coach someone to come to that right conclusion. But also we have a phenomenal role as superheroes to connect. Whether we make regular visits to the office or create virtual environments, it's really important. And that's what I've really missed myself by, sometimes setting up my own business. You connect with a lot of people, but via the screen. And now that things are opening up, I'm taking more opportunities to have coffees or go and see people in their offices, or, run something in face to face. I did a 2-day offsite. It was just really nice to not be in the same place. And, I'm going to go and do a client on site in a couple of weeks as part of understanding their HR team. It's just really nice to be able to connect with people. And that's the human in me, as an extrovert. I need that, and I found that incredibly difficult during lockdown, to be sort of not able to see anybody at all. So the connector, I think, both is in the role that we connect the dots and create that employee experience, but also that we connect with people within the organization. And that is, for me, your role, and our role is to be that conductor in the orchestra. As a conductor in the orchestra, you're not telling the first violins or the percussion how to play. You're enabling all of those talents to come together and realize their potential. Now, we also got to be trusted to hold up the mirror for the organization and remain impartial and fair. And that's really important. And I've definitely, the best HR teams I've ever worked for can basically be that. They can still be the provocateurs. They can still challenge, but they also stand for impartiality and fairness, and they're trusted. They trust, I trust my team phenomenally. And I always say, I trust you until you prove me wrong. So I think that's really important in connection. And you create that join up across the whole employee experience. So, how you get great people and how you keep great people. And ultimately you create the glue that puts it together. So that's the connector. Then moving on to attributes. Now, this is about being brave and bold. So bravery, and that comes with resilience sometimes, and setbacks, is don't being afraid to ask for help. So I definitely asked for help last year. I had counselling, but I also leaned on my friends. I went for a lot of walks. I wasn't sure how to deal with certain situations. I lost a lot of confidence last year, so I used my network. And I was brave and able to, and didn't feel, and was quite happy to be vulnerable, both with my team as well as with friends and family, because no one expects us to know all the answers. So whether you like to reflect, or whether you're like me, kind of goes with their guts, it's really important to think about who your internal and external networks are and how you use them. And on Monday we talked about mentoring, and we had a panel. And I was saying how mentors can be a really important part of that, but also they can hold the mirror up and give you some real impartial advice. And it's really important to think about that. Thank you, Charlie. That's really kind. And then I think there's also something about being bold. For me, setting up this business was an itch that I wanted to scratch. I wanted to create opportunities for individuals, teams, and organizations to create that join up and that simply irresistible organization. But I'm not afraid to make mistakes. I've definitely learned from a huge amount of mistakes over the last couple of years. 7 years I've been running Let's Talk Talent. We need to create environments where it's okay to fail fast and fail often. And it's not about finger pointing or, saying, oh, you should have done that, or we should, actually it's good to reflect and think about, we do project reviews after all of our, a client project, because we want to think about how we improve the experience. And because change is constant. Ultimately, we can't be bold, we can't be innovative if we don't look back and reflect. But if we're spending our life looking in the rearview mirror, then we're going to crash ultimately. So don't be afraid to stretch yourself, but also create that environment that enables people to step out of their comfort zone and enable that to happen. So, I always take considered risks. I do take risks, but they are considered, and I've weighed up the pros and cons. I'm not going to hire 20 people in my business. That would be madness, but I have hired a project manager and a new person in sales because I want to grow the business. So I'm taking a considered risk in terms of where I think we're going to go. Be brave. I've definitely seen this with a couple of HR leaders recently when they've totally vehemently disagreed with the CEO and the direction, or there's been, a D&I issue, and they've really spoken out for the people. And that ultimately we work for in an organization, and wanting to make that lasting effect and change. Sometimes we have to do the right thing, even though it sometimes can be really unpopular and uncomfortable, but really making that decision and holding your leaders accountable for that, I think is phenomenal. And really the best leaders and the best HR superheroes are being visible in good times and in bad. So some of the feedback that I've had from leaders or teams recently on a couple of reviews that I've done is that leader just disappeared. When they needed to make the redundancies, they completely disappeared. And therefore, they didn't trust that that leader had their back. So it's really important visibly, whether it's online or face-to-face, to be visible when things are going right as well as when things are difficult. And finally, relationships. So, this goes without saying, being a strategic business leader. So you're balancing and pivoting the business need and the cultural need in finding new ways and to create, develop, and keep your talent engaged. And we know from where I started on this webinar that can be really difficult, especially in sort of a hybrid world. But ultimately, being that strategic business leader enables you to stay at the top and be seen by the leadership team as a peer and someone that's valued beyond the culture and the people side, that actually you are adding huge amounts of value to that business. And then inclusivity. We're creating environments where people could be psychologically safe, where they can be themselves, You know, I've left organizations because I haven't felt I can be myself. I didn't always have red hair, but I went into an organization when I first started the business. Some of you may have heard me tell this story before. It was a retail, high-end retail store group. And they wanted me to pitch for a leadership and management program. And I walked in with my yellow shoes and red hair, and I didn't wear black. I was a bit colourful, and I pitched, and I spoke to the talent director at the time, and he said, "Really, really great, loved your pitch." And then I said to him, he asked for feedback, and he said, "Well, look, Joe, I really love you. I think you're really good. I love your energy. I think you're really creative. Da, 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 da. But I can't hire you." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because no one will take you seriously with red hair." And I came home and I said to my late husband at the time, "We worked so hard on that. I'm gutted and everything." And he turned around to me and said, "Well, look, if they don't want to hire you because of your red hair, then they're not the right client for you." And it taught me a huge lesson that ultimately I needed to be myself and not apologize for the quirkiness. And actually, sometimes it's really important to be, by understanding myself and understanding what I'm willing to compromise on, then I represent my business and I represent the people and organizations really well. And I'm sure these things happen now in the way, I had somebody as a manager, I had a talent acquisition partner who had a sleeve tattoo. And one of the managers said, "Could you ask her to wear long sleeve tops? Because I don't think it's appropriate that she's got a tattoo." And I turned around and said, "No, that's who she is. It's got nothing to do with her, how good she is as a job. But these things happen, right? So we need to create environments where we truly represent the customers and the people that we serve. So as a strategic business leader, let's think about being less operational. That's difficult if you're in an operational role, but think about how you're adding value to the business, how you're creating that join up. Now, are you at the top table? And if not, why not? How do you create that space to enable you to be at that top table? Align your customer proposition. So is there a gap between your customer proposition and your internal employee proposition? If there is, how do you bridge that? And having an HR strategy, strategy is again an overused word. A plan on a page of what you're going to achieve within the next year, 2 years, 5 years is really important in people seeing you as that strategic business leader. So we're going to send you a blank model for you to use, because again, we've given you a template today, but you may want to tweak that and create that in your own image and in the image of your organization. So we will be following that up in terms of your model. Apologies, Dylan's wants to get out, but he's not going to till I finish this webinar. So in summary, this is a really exciting time to be an HR leader, but let's not forget change does take time. So you can't go from hero to zero in the space of 5 minutes. So, really think about the change and how long you want that to take. We're at the top table. It's now it's now what we do defines us. So let's keep ourselves there. Let's think about how we do that. Take time to develop yourself. Everybody on this call is taking time to develop themselves. Do take note of any other webinars that we do or any other organizations that run. For me, learning is really important. It's part of who I am, but give yourself the space, give yourself the permission to do that. Seek support where you feel you might have a gap, whether that's a mentor, whether it's a coach, whether that's networking events. Think about where you might do that. But let's ultimately be all HR superheroes and put the human back into human resources. So I promised you some support at the end. And before I take any questions, here are some tools and techniques for you. So if you are thinking about creating an HR strategy and thinking about, your superhero and creating that, we've got a number of free white papers from HR strategy to career development to succession. And we will be sending links out to those for you after this webinar. But they're free resources that you can download, and hopefully they'll help you. And Charlie's just put that into the chat, so you can take a look and download any of those. We're running, and we launched it on Monday. Anybody that would like a mentor or would like to be a mentee on our pro bono, it's our 5th HR Leaders Mentoring cohort. We're going to be focusing on careers, purpose and well-being as a theme. If you'd like to apply to be one of our brilliant mentors or mentees, please sign up by the end of the month, and we'd love to have you on it, and you get a lot of support during that. We've also got, if you're looking to join up your customer proposition with your employee value proposition, an EVP Toolkit. It's a paid-for resource, but it's a toolkit that can take you through how you create that. And again, we're going to put the link into the chat. We talked about the motivation and energy tool. If you want to follow that up, it can give you real support in 360s in leadership development. Hopefully that will give you that personalization. And finally, if you'd like to just have a chat with me, I'm really happy to, I always love to talk, and I always like to learn from other people. If you want to have a free, it's no selling, it's just a chat, then again, please book a session with me. It's always good to kind of follow up and kind of hear how you're getting on and what you're doing. So any questions? So Jess has got a question. I'm about to start a new role. Any tips for first 90 days? Well, Jess, I think the most important thing in the first 90 days is for you to be able to have the permission to really understand the business and to ask a lot of questions. I did that, and I always give that advice to anyone starting in a new role. You've got a real privilege to really understand both the business and the culture, and to really get under the hood of what's going on. You know, looking at what's gone before, hearing from the leadership team, really holding the mirror up and saying, one person saying one thing, another person saying another. Here are the tribes that exist within our organization. Are we serving them? And then creating a plan that enables you to work through the gaps and opportunities ultimately. So I would take time to really understand the business and the people and create a review of that to then enable you to create a plan. I'd also look at data. You know, what's the constitution of the business? You know, what are the KPIs? I'd really start to think about that as well. So hopefully that will serve you well, but always happy to talk to you if that helps you. Any other questions?